Welcome back, everybody. Well, immigration is turning entire cities Muslim, and the UK is becoming a segregated society with whole communities living an entirely un-British life. The problem is that Islam brings with it the expectation that you will live in a certain way that is not conforming to the traditional habits of life in the UK. Those are the words of Reform UK MP Danny Kruger, who recently sensationally defected from the Conservative Party to Reform UK. He claims this is not what people voted for and is not consistent with the best interests of our country as well. And I want to dig in to the data and see if this statement holds any truth to it. Let's look at Tower Hamlets in East London. Well, 39% of the population are Muslim there as of 2021. That's up 38% just a decade earlier. Birmingham, our second city, heart of the Industrial Revolution, that's now 29.9% Muslim, a 8-point jump in 10 years. Bradford, well, is now at 30% and climbing. 166,000 people identify as Muslim in the city there. Leicester and Oldham also have thriving Muslim communities with between 20 and 25% of their populations identifying as Muslim. Many people in those cities are, of course, from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Somalia, according to data. While the UK data doesn't track religion directly for migrants, nationality proxies show significant inflows from Muslim-majority countries, of course, as I just said, such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia and Nigeria. These nations contributed disproportionately to non-EU migration, especially via work, study, family and asylum routes. So, is it any wonder Trump claimed we might be headed towards Sharia law?
I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law.
There's a lot of confusion as whether he was talking about Sadiq Khan or in general the population of the UK. But I don't think he's entirely wrong. A 2018 independent review commissioned by the Home Office on the application of Sharia law in England and Wales again put the number of Sharia councils in England and Wales at between 30 and 85, despite the left claiming that Trump's comments are baseless. So is Danny Kruger right? Is this not what British people voted for? Well, personally, I don't think we voted for this at all. Not during Brexit, and not when the country voted for successive Tory governments who promised to control our borders, but instead opened the floodgates.
The Boris wave, as they're calling it.
Who are you going to kick out? The Ukrainians? You want to kick out the Ukrainians?
No.
You want to kick out the Hong Kong Chinese?
Well, look, the blue line is...
You want to kick out the nurses? I'm very, very proud of what we did, because we took back... We can have... If we want zero nurses, if we want nobody to come in for social care, if you want... We can have zero, right?
I don't think that's what the public meant when they wanted you to take back control, Boris. Anyway, the big question arising is not whether most Muslims can live harmoniously in our society, as over decades, those from Muslim countries have, in the vast majority of cases, integrated well into our population. But it's now, with the huge influx of migrants to the UK, both legally and illegally, that we have to be honest and say something isn't working. And I will challenge Danny Kruger on his entire point, because I don't think this issue is just about how many Muslims have come to the UK, but how many people in general are coming to our country. How can any race or religious group of people ever integrate into British life when they make up the vast majority of populations in many areas? That's the key difference. You can assimilate, you can integrate, but not when you are the vast majority of the population there. This is what Kruger means, I think, when he claims that we are creating segregated communities. In fact, British people, I think, living in those areas will end up having to assimilate to a different way of life other than the British way of life, which is completely the wrong way around. I think the establishment have got this completely wrong. I'm now joined by my panel, broadcaster and journalist Linda Jubilee, former Met Police detective Peter Bleksley and former Labour Party chair Diane Hayter. Peter, I'll start with you. And I think Danny Kruger's making a point. This is a conversation we have a lot now about assimilation, about integration. He's essentially saying whole cities are turning Muslim. Now, that would maybe indicate why they want to remove the right to remain, those sorts of things, because we have seen this big influx of people, millions of people coming to the country. What do you make of the comments?
And whenever you have this kind of conversation, the lunatic left, because they're in denial, will just shout, "You're racists, you're racists." It's the only argument they've got, because, of course, repeated governments have opened the floodgates. The first census conducted after I was born was in 1961, and it revealed that 21,000 people identified as being Muslim. There's now nearly 4 million Muslims in the country, so that's happened in my lifetime. It is entirely understandable and reasonable that people are concerned about that, because it's shifted the dynamics in terms of the percentage of Christians in this country. The last census was the first one that revealed we're no longer a majority Christian country, and yet so much of the foundations of this nation were kind of built on Christian values, man-made laws, Christian values, and the whole mix has been changed. The demographics continue to change. There is a shocking lack of integration in many regards, and it's only right that we're having these conversations regardless of what the left lunatics are screaming.
And Diane, I'll come straight to you on this one, because of course I'm not blaming Labour for this, because I think this is the vast majority of those, that huge Boris wave, we call it the Boris wave for a reason, because it came in under Boris. It's not sustainable to bring in millions of people into this country and expect them to assimilate, expect them to integrate, expect them to be part of British culture, because you go to certain places, and I listed some of them there, actually what happens is people group together and then you can't assimilate into British culture, can you?
Well, first of all, let's be careful of our language. They're not a majority. I mean, the idea it's a majority, your own figures showed we're talking about a third, so let's keep it right. Secondly, of course, a lot come from the Commonwealth. We have, they are part of us, they've fought with us, they've been part of us, and a lot come from that, and those are old ties, and we shouldn't be tarring, if you like, a group that we have long history with as if they're bringing in an alien culture. The third thing I'd say...
I would take issue with that, because I think a culture that isn't British is alien culture.
Well, our culture is a Commonwealth culture.
I don't think that's true.
We've had a Commonwealth here, we've had Canadians, we've had Indians, we've had Australians, we've had New Zealanders. All of those have come here, and many of us come from families that weren't born here. So, that is a long history. But the important thing is, most Muslims, of course, do not want Sharia law, and it's very bad for women very often, we need to warn them. So, I think we have to be very careful about our language here, that we assume all Muslims don't want to integrate, all Muslims hold on to a type of their religion which doesn't fit in so closely to ours. And, of course, what you've just said about the fall in Christianity is actually not about the relative with Muslims, but our just church-going has gone down considerably.
Yeah. Linda, I'll pass it straight over to you.
I would kind of argue with the fact that most Muslims don't want Sharia law, because most of the time I am a journalist, but I've spoken about it before. I ran a programme teaching English to refugees and asylum seekers, and I can tell you that most of the Muslims I met do want Sharia law. Now, there are 30 Sharia councils. They may not be law courts, but actually they are very powerful and very influential in the Muslim community, and they do deal with things like domestic violence, about abusive marriages, about all sorts of things where they come down, in my view, very unfairly on women, and those things need to be sorted out, because that is anathema to our British values in this country. And I'll just give you one small example. I used to teach English via, in particular, a sewing class, because that's a very tried and trusted method of getting through to some of the women I had to deal with. And I went shopping for material in Luton. I had to take a translator, because it was impossible for me to go shopping, impossible for me to conduct any transactions hours without a translator because nobody spoke English.
But that is a really important point for all people who come here. I mean, I think to get British nationality, you ought to be able to speak English, as you would do if you moved to France.
But hang on, I thought...
Nick, please, can I, without being shouted at, that if you move to France or Germany or anywhere else, you're expected to learn their language. And I think
they didn't, though.
That's what I'm saying, but we have to expect people to learn language, and we should not be giving them citizenship or nationality unless they speak English. I think that's really key.
Peter?
You talk about British nationality, but in your previous sentence, you said that we were built on a Commonwealth culture, which is, quite frankly, the biggest load of preposterous drivel I've heard in a long time.
Don't use silly words like that. I mean, we're meant to be having a grown-up conversation here rather than...
But I'm telling the truth.
I think
the
point Peter's trying to make is, and I take issue with it as well, the British culture goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. The imperial bit of it is a very small part of our history, frankly, and I wouldn't say that many of the people from the Commonwealth were even living in Britain until very recently. So it's a very short period of our history. So I wouldn't attribute our culture to Commonwealth culture by any means. Yes, we are living in a more diverse culture than we have before. The point that I think Danny Kruger was making, which is quite interesting, it's a national conversation we're having, which is why we're talking about it, is that there is such vast population change. When you bring millions of people into the country, you look at places like Oldham, perhaps, and you see actually that the white British people there might be the majority. Therefore, you ask, how is it possible for people to integrate in those areas into our way of life? Surely they're going to assume the identity of the vast majority of the people that live there.
Well, no, I think most of the people coming here are actually wanting to come here for a way of life that means they're going to work and build a life here. I think we have to encourage. I think the teaching of English and the integration, if they're going to come, is really important. It's not an add-on.
I think
it should be absolutely central. But what you're saying, a lot of them have been here for a long, long time, and I think as a nation we were not good enough at insisting on language and integration.
But a lot
to make it
4 million people or so in the last 5 years. This is the point, isn't it?
We've had
it's lunacy.
We've had integration from the European Union. I mean, part of the difference, which is why you use the phrase, I think, the Boris wave, is that we closed down an awful lot of the people who had a culture much more close to us. Of course, I was anti-Brexit, and I always worried that we were losing a part of our European heritage, which I feel very strongly about.
But the point people made when they voted for Brexit was actually, and as the Tory manifesto said, multiple elections, we're going to get immigration to tens of thousands, we're going to basically shut it off, it's too much, we can't cope with it, and instead we had the opposite, Peter.
We did. But immigration is the subject on everybody's tip of their tongue when I'm in a pub, if I bump into somebody, if I meet someone I've never met before.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the first thing they want to talk about is immigration. It is a huge issue. The numbers have been ludicrous. They're unsustainable. British culture is being diluted with every boat that arrives, with every illegal that comes into this country. And a reminder, they are illegal because Section 3 of the Immigration Act 1971 says so. It's diluted. Something has to be done. This government are so pathetic in their attempts to do it. Well, they haven't done it. They're now bringing in this compulsory ID, which is not going to solve the issue.
Certainly agree. I
would just disagree with Diane here. A lot of the Afghans, some Iranians and Pakistanis that I encountered during these a couple of teaching programmes I did, they just want to import their culture into this country. They do not want to assimilate. That's what they told me firsthand. I don't have to read about it in a newspaper. I was down there in the trenches dealing with this, don't forget. And that's what these people wanted. They simply want to have the mosque, the Sharia council. The wives don't ever learn English. The older wives never learn. And they want to sit in their community and talk in what amounts to a modern ghetto.
I think this is going to be the biggest part of our national conversation leading up to the next general election. I really don't think we're going to stop talking about this, particularly if, and let's see what happens next year with the ONS figures, if the number's in the hundreds of thousands again, I think Keir Starmer's going to have a lot of trouble justifying it, especially with the lack of house building, the NHS waiting list, and everything else that's going on with this country. We just cannot sustain millions more people coming here. That's the end of it all, really, isn't it?